All right, welcome back to another Wednesday training. Every Wednesday, I like to go live and talk about all things that can make you a better man: health, wealth, mindset, relationships, fatherhood, because none of these things are separate. They're all, you can't compartmentalize any of these things. And when it comes to work life balance, there's no such thing. And so, one of the big questions, though, that I get often asked by me as a relationship coach and a marriage coach is, usually what I hear from guys is when they reach out to me for relationship help, the number one thing they tell me is, I'm getting a divorce, help me, or I'm getting separated, help me, what do I do? And usually I don't like to say that it's too late for me to help. I always think of this as the check engine light. Like, this is your wife saying she's in overwhelm, she's ran out of ideas or solutions. And so the next logical thing to do is to separate. So I do think there is hope for you, but if it's gotten that far, also, you probably haven't done enough. You've probably made a lot of mistakes to getting there. That wasn't the first time. And so, what I wanted to do is bring on a legal expert, my good friend Joe Clark here, to talk about, who's an attorney. And we're going to talk about a lot of the misnomers, a lot of the things that guys don't understand, some of the myths, some of the lack of knowledge that these guys don't have. And that's why facing a divorce or going through that process, it's scary and really expensive because they don't know how to navigate it. And I think Joe is going to come on today and we're going to dispel a lot of those things. And I think hopefully by the end of this episode, you're going to see, wow, I do have some power. I can take some of this power back and it's not so scary. At the end of the day, I would love for everybody to work out their relationship issues and not go through the divorce. But if it comes for that, at least we can teach some proactive techniques and some things that you can do to get ahead of it so you can mitigate some of the damage, mitigate some of the stress. And at the end of the day, it's all about keeping your family, your kids, and everybody, and keeping them out of it, I think, as much as possible so that there's not as much stress for you and the entire family. So that's what this episode is going to be about. Without further ado, welcome my good friend Joe Clark to the show.
Hey, Joel, it's good to see you. It's funny. One of the things you said started to make me laugh. I didn't start getting into family law, or that's not how I started when I started practicing years ago. But as soon as, you know, first responders, divorce is a really high rate. And I think the number one question I've received over the years has been, oh, you're a lawyer. Hey, I'm getting a divorce. Like, I would hear that on almost a weekly, bi-weekly basis. Like, hey, so let's say things don't work out with me and my wife. Like, what's happening to my pension? That was like literally a weekly thing. It was hilarious because that's never the type of law that I started practicing. But yeah, that's an extremely common occurrence.
Yeah. So for people that don't know you, Joe, talk about some of your background, because I'm going to be very clear. We'll be very transparent. Like, that is not, you're not a, the family law attorney or a divorce attorney. Like, you would never call yourself that, but you are an attorney. You were also a police officer. And so I think, but I'll let you tell the story. You also have been divorced. And so you've had to navigate your own divorce and you came out quite swimmingly. But, again, people don't have this knowledge. And so because they don't have it, they're scared. There's fear, there's scarcity mindset. They don't know what to do. But anyways, talk about just your background in law and law enforcement and kind of how you've gotten to, in a sense, like you said, as a byproduct, because you got so much demand, people are asking for your help.
So I started out doing international. I work for some NGOs, non-governmental organizations. Now, here's the deal. I tend to dislike most lawyers, and so if I use some legalese, I'll try and not dumb it down, but I'll try and explain it in a way that's not unattainable. Because lawyers love to use large words, or like cops, we use cop speak. Lawyers like to use legalese so that we make a joke in the law world. The bigger the words I use, the more I can charge you. So we'll use legalese, make people feel stupid, and go, oh, maybe I don't really know that. I really need someone's help. So in general, I speak very plainly. We worked together a long time. I don't mind upsetting people. I don't mind if it's the truth. I'll say it. I'm not looking to upset anybody, but I will try and speak things very plainly. So again, stop me if there's anything I say that's confusing or needs to be explained in a more reachable or approachable way.
Yeah.
So I started out doing international law in Europe and in Asia in like the early 2000s. So that's where I started. I worked for non-governmental organizations. The main one, I was working for the European Roma Rights Center, the ERRC. It's based in Budapest. So that's about as far away from family law as you can get. I came back to the US. I got my law degree from USF, and I started practicing. I did mostly civil and corporate litigation. And, that again is pretty far from family law. I've dabbled and I've set up LLCs. I can do some corporate formation, but I didn't do any family law until I had to do my own divorce. So I got divorced maybe like 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, and my ex-wife and I had a very amicable divorce. We only had one house. We had one child, and so there wasn't a lot to fight over, and we got along pretty well. So if the two parties aren't fighting, we can do a divorce in an afternoon. Like, I mean, seriously, if the two are willing to work together, you don't need a lawyer. You can go to a mediator, save that money. The more fighting there are, divorce attorneys love it when there's fighting, because then they're making money. Divorce attorneys don't get like 30% of a class action settlement. They only get their hourly for what they work on your case. The two parties are fighting. The divorce attorneys, and again, I'm not painting them all with a large brush, but that means more money for them. So, in our case, not to get too much into the weeds or the details, but there really wasn't a lot to fight about. Everything was split down the middle, and I saved us the cost of having to spend $10,000, $15,000 per person. The average cost, I don't know what the current one is, but if you're a millionaire, your cost is going to be in the millions. If you're an average Joe, you're probably looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. And when you don't have a lot of assets, that is a shit ton to spend on getting the divorce, because you're eating into the money you're both going to walk away with. So that was my first foray into family law. And since then, when I started doing it, I was like, it can't be this easy. I mean, again, everybody has their own focus. Like tax law, I would get destroyed by a tax attorney, who had been doing it for 20 years. I'd have to immerse myself into tax law to learn what that was about. But, this is going to be probably not going to win me any friends in the family law universe, but family law is kind of the minor leagues of law practice. And by that, I mean, think about it like this. What are all the shows about? Suits. A Few Good Men, the movies, The Firm. Nobody's sitting there in law school going, I really, really want to sit behind a desk and push paper and never see the inside of a courtroom. That's not what aspiring lawyers want to be. When you're a kid, you want to go be a professional baseball player. You don't say, I want to be a tax attorney. So
you want to be the Johnny Cochran. You want to be in the limelight. Yeah, the OJ trial.
Yes.
You can't handle the truth. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you want to be Lieutenant Cathy, So if you went to a law school and there was 100 kids in the class and you say, what do you want to do? Everyone would say trial attorney. Almost
100%. 100%.
Almost all of them, because it's what you see in the movies. It's sexy. Like the way it works is or if they're in it just for the money, the civil and corporate litigators, partner track. That's $1 million a year, $2 million a year. You have your own client book. Junior partner, $250,000, $500,000, depending on what firm you're at. So that's the major leagues. That's what, and again, these are all generalizations. To be fair, I have friends that are family law attorneys, and they are true believers. They wanted to do it. Maybe they had a bad divorce. Maybe, they went through a bad divorce with their parents. Some people are just drawn to a specific type of law.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not looking at family lawyers and saying they all suck or they're all not like the lowest. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form. What I am saying is in law school, everyone wants to get a clerkship, an internship with the judge, or a summer clerkship with a law firm, and they want to start off at $250,000 a year. That's everyone's goal.
Yep.
Typically, the people that end up in family law, or even worse, the whole joke is ambulance chaser, right? That is considered the lowest of the low. The whole world knows the joke ambulance. You're an ambulance chaser. You're a personal injury attorney. By the way, one of the cops I work with for a long time, his brother owns a personal injury firm, making millions. So it's not like you can't be successful at something, but the rest of the world views more of the transactional. So tax law is transactional, family law is transactional, wills and trusts is transactional. That's you sit behind a desk, you fill out some paperwork, and you get to push back and forth. So And again, something like we talked about it a second ago, but I can call myself a family lawyer. I can literally say, yes, Joel, I practice family law. Yeah, I've done
Yeah,
it.
so you don't go when you go to law school, there's not like, oh, I'm gonna major in family law or corporate law. Like you essentially just become a lawyer,
Yep.
skilled in the law. And then I don't know, Joe, but when you go to work for firms like these NGOs, is it just how do you get hired for that job? Is it based on just like the clout of your university, USF, and then also how well you interview and some of your accolades, I guess? I don't know.
So, like, the best lawyers, the top of the class, they're going to be spending their summers clerking for judges, like for here it'd be in the Ninth Circuit or Cal Supreme Court, or you're going to be summer interning at the top firms in the world, Morrison and Forrester, MoFo, Jones Day, Latham and Watkins. Like, so you will apply for these summer internships, and they're usually unpaid. Sometimes the bigger firms will pay you too, and all they're doing is that's like the minor leagues. That's a feeder. They go, look, you summered in first year, second year, we're offering you a job. So you have a guaranteed job. Those top lawyers, they have a guaranteed job before they even leave law school. I had a guaranteed job before I left law school. And the same thing, if you want to clerk for a judge and you clerk maybe in between your first year and second year, law school is typically 3 years. So your first year, second year, then in between your second year, third year, all those top firms are going to be like, oh, you clerked for so and so. We
Got
want
it.
you for our summer internship. So that's usually how that works. Otherwise, if you hit the pool, you come out as just a lawyer. You don't have any specialities. There's no major in law school. Now, you can spend your second and your third year taking international law and some other things to improve your knowledge base, but it depends on where you get the job. Your
Right.
firm will dictate what type of law you practice for the most part.
Mhm.
So, I came out and I started working for a civil, mostly civil litigation and some corporate. Some of our clients were, J.P. Morgan, Walmart, Banana Republic, The Gap. We did some insurance defense as well, State Farm. So that dictates. You can't say I'm going to be a criminal lawyer and go work for Morrison and Forrester if Morrison and Forrester isn't doing criminal defense. Like you can't do that. Your firm is going to be like, hey, you're at the bottom. You just started. These are your cases. You don't get to choose anything. On
Yeah.
your own time, if you want to do some pro bono, the big firms like to do that and say, do some pro bono and make us look good so we can brag about you doing pro bono. But
Got it.
so just to finish this up, I can go into my Cal bar and just choose the box. I'm a family law attorney. Like there's 40 something different types of law and you can update it whenever you want. And so somebody coming out brand new is going to check all the boxes often. They'll check a bunch of boxes and go, I do civil and corporate and family and tax and this, because they want to come up in a search engine because they need the if they're a solo practitioner, they need the business.
Yeah.
As you develop over time, you go, look, I specialize in these areas, but there's no family law license or corporate law license or civil law license or anything like that proves that you're that type of a lawyer.
Yeah, love that. And I love that we gave that just explanation, which I think is really powerful because I told you I had a divorce attorney recently on my podcast, and I was just very surprised and shocked. She had been doing this for like 15 plus years, so very experienced in her work. And she said she was nervous when she went on to court because that she was going to get multiple objections from the other lawyer. And I looked at her and I'm like, but isn't that like part of the game? And she's like, yes, but it's very stressful. And I thought, no, it's not. Like, you should just expect it. And having been a former police officer, I was on the stand all the time, and it's a theater, it's a play. Like, you prepare so much before you get in on the stand that then it's just a movie star. You're just preparing, you're playing to the audience. You want to sound good because I could be the best. I could have written the best report, but if I sound like a liar or like very closed off and like a mean guy, like a mean cop, what do you think the perception is going to be to the judge and everybody else? So to me, it was always a show. And when I told you that, you're like, yeah, Joel, that's because all lawyers are not built equal. Like there's some shitty ones and there's some good ones. And one of the things I've learned from being your friend and talking to you off to the side is that what I love about your style is you're very aggressive. And clearly the lawyer that I was talking to in the podcast was not aggressive. And so I was just thinking how many people she's probably litigated for and lost a lot of deals. So, and probably didn't do very well for the clients unless it was a easy case just down the middle, and everyone was amicable, like you said. So I think people need to understand, when they don't have this context, who you're choosing as your lawyer, who to be, and then also someone like you who's very well versed and has done many lawsuits and has also litigated, but also helped over 15 other people do their own divorces. There's just because you're not a family law doesn't really mean anything. And I know that because I just had a 15-year divorce attorney tell me the same thing. Like, big deal. That's like her regular gig, and I don't know if she does a great job at it. So that's what I wanted to clear up with the audience and you.
Yeah. So the number one, and this goes out to everybody, man, woman, it doesn't matter what your position is. I'm not speaking just to men on this, but this goes to everybody. The number one quality you want in a lawyer is aggression. The number one. And it sounds weird to say that because...
Or maybe you could even say offensive. I think, I always remember Jocko Willink, the famous Navy SEAL, he would always say, be on the offense. And most people are playing defense and they're sitting back, and he's like, wrong. You want to be aggressive. You want to be on the battlefield. Be offensive.
Yeah. So and here's the thing. Like, I think I've only sued one person personally my entire life because he sold me a car that broke down like a mile later. And then it turns out he knew about it. And I begged him. I didn't want to sue him. I begged him to just give me the $500 to fix it. It's like 20 years ago. I am not like the sue. I don't like giving lawyers money if you don't have to. I've done people's friends' divorces for complete free. I'm not trying to generate income. I think if you can do it for free with a mediator and you both get along, first off, if you can save your marriage, save your marriage. There's not abuse. There's no, try everything you can. Go to therapy, etc. Do the work to try and save it. If you come to the point where you can't save it, and one or both of you wants or needs a divorce, then at that point you need to figure out what kind of attorney you're going to hire, and whether it's you want to paint it as offensive or be on the offensive or aggressive. If you talk to your lawyer and you say, hey, so I need someone who's aggressive, and they don't go, that's me immediately, then they're not aggressive. What you'll get, or you're likely to get with somebody who practices family law, because family law is transactional.
Yeah.
This is your typical divorce, assuming that there's not tons of assets and hidden money and stuff like that. I file for a divorce. You have 30 days to respond and to my request for a divorce, and you can't not divorce me. So you have 30 days to respond. 60 days from me asking for a divorce, I have to give you my financial information, and we have to lay out the child scheduling. 60 days from your response, you have to do the same thing. Give me your FL-150, your income and expense declaration, some of your pay stubs, etc. Then 180 days from the filing, we can get divorced. In between disclosing your finances and the 180 days, 6 months out, you're trying to come up with your dissolution agreement or your divorce agreement. And that's it. There's literally initial filing, response, my finances, your finances, and then our agreement, and you're done. A divorce can be done, like I said, in an afternoon if you're not fighting. But you need to have, remember The Godfather?
Yeah.
Okay, remember Robert Duvall? He was the only one who wasn't Italian. He was the Irish lawyer, right?
The consigliere.
Consigliere. So here's the thing. He was, there was mostly peace in the first Godfather when Marlon Brando had it. Well, Marlon Brando dies. Not to spoiler. If you haven't watched The Godfather, you don't deserve to watch this podcast.
Yeah.
So
Stop what you're doing. Pause this podcast. Go watch all three.
No, the third one's horrible. But so in the second one, Al Pacino is Michael. He's a Godfather's son. He becomes the new Godfather after Marlon Brando dies, and the families start warring. Well, the consigliere, their lawyer, is Robert Duvall, and Michael Al Pacino fires him and says, I can't involve you in my dealings. You are not a wartime consigliere. And what it was is Robert Duvall liked to keep the peace. He liked to be nice. He liked to but if you're at war, you need someone with the ability to go to war. So that's why having an attorney that is aggressive, you don't want somebody that's just picking fights for no reason. So, because they're going to rack up their attorney's fees. You don't want that. But you do want somebody, if the other side is being dishonest, they're hiding money, they're not responding to your discovery requests, you need someone to take them to task. And I can tell you, having been to court against family law attorneys, 30-year family law attorneys, 44-year family law attorneys. They're not aggressive. They're not used to being held to task. They're not used to taking other people to task. Sometimes like and again, I didn't watch that episode, but I guarantee you that lawyer that you interviewed, she had direct evidence that the other side was lying and probably said, well, Your Honor, we found some abnormalities. No. They are lying. Here is the evidence. So you need to hit someone when you need to hit someone. And then if there's no fight to be had, don't have a fight. But you can't retain an attorney that doesn't have the ability to ramp things up. And so many transactional attorneys, quote unquote family law attorneys, they don't tend to have these difficult cases where there's motions to compel and hidden assets and forensic experts like forensic accountants. That's like 1 out of 100 of their cases. And speaking of that, the reason why, and I have found this not myself, but in speaking to all the people that I ended up helping who went through 2 or 3 attorneys before they got to me or I referred them to someone else. It's a numbers game for family law and transactional. Just like workers' comp, you've had workers' comp. They need hundreds of cases because they are not making massive settlements off each case. It's the same for family law. They can't take 10 clients because they're charging hourly. So they need to have 50, 75, 100 clients because, like I said, it's file something, wait 60 days. File something else, wait 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a numbers game for them. And it's not their fault. It's the way that family law is structured. So that is why when a lot of these people call their attorney, they don't get a call back. Or they get pushed off to next week. Or let you talk to my assistant or a paralegal. Or they can never... I was talking to somebody just a month ago, and he's like, I've called my attorney 4 times, they won't return my call.
Yeah, I hear that all the time, Joe.
You're one of 100 clients. Your deadline, per the attorney looks at it and goes, deadline's not for 4 months. Why is this guy bothering me? And that's like a jerk, but so that's what is in the lawyer's head is you're not my only client. I have 100 of them. So that's kind of the way that family law works. And so that's why a lot of people, and I understand the frustration because I would not, if for you, it's everything. I'm getting a divorce. I'm losing my house, my pension, my kids. I need to talk to somebody right now. And the lawyer is more separated from it going, well, your case isn't nearly as bad as other 10 cases. I have another 70 or 80 and we don't have a deadline for a month. So I'll get to you when I can. And the lawyers don't understand the anxiety that person has because that's their everything right now.
Yeah, so key. One last part I wanted to talk about with the aggression that we were talking about. You just had a recent case that you were involved in, and you were telling me that the lawyer privately told you, "I'm done with you. I need a whole team or something to deal with just you. I'm out. They're going to have to get somebody else. I can't deal with you." Can you talk about that story? I thought that was just great.
I can't talk about specifics.
Okay.
I'm still, the case is active.
Yeah.
But, and the lawyer isn't a bad guy. But he had been a family law lawyer, I think it's 44 years. And like you said, I've probably helped out on a couple dozen cases, like 8 to 10 full divorces, 10 to 12 full divorces, and then partial, assisting in filing and then transferring it to a friend or referral. But in this specific case, this lawyer, his client was very dishonest and had been hiding money and we're cops. So I have a critical mind anyway. As a lawyer, it's trained and honed. But then as a cop, I'm like, we've read through police reports and we're like, that doesn't add up with that. That's completely false. And then, I did this massive investigation. Do you remember the Muni cable car operators that were stealing? Yeah. So that was our Muni task force. And we found out there was these 2 or 3 guys that stole millions of dollars. But we had to pour over just 15 years of credit card or of cable car receipts. So I like finance and numbers come easy to me. So I'm looking at a lot of these numbers and they're just not adding up. The math doesn't math. So when I see deceit, I start pressing. So I started pressing and I started going to the lawyer going, this isn't true. This isn't accurate. Your client's not being honest. Here's where the numbers don't. Well, your client may have told you this, but here is some other evidence. And I talked to him a couple times in person at his office, but I talked to him on the phone and he shortly before the hearing, he's like, you know what? He's like, I'm kind of tired of this. He's like, he's like, I'm going to have to hire a whole litigation team just to deal with you. And I was like, well, that's because you have 100 clients and I have a couple that I care about very deeply. So I
Yeah.
am going to be fighting for that person to the highest extent I can. And so 3 weeks later, he dropped his client. So, I mean, it just shows like hold someone to task, be aggressive. But I wasn't a jerk to him. When we spoke in person and when we spoke on the phone, there was no screw you. I'm going to bend you. I'm going to take your client. It was just like, hey, man, not okay. Hey,
Yeah.
also not okay. Hey, objection. He didn't object to, I sent out subpoenas. He didn't object to them. And then he says, oh, look, I'm not going to object. I'm going to be a nice guy. No, your job is to object. Your job to your client is to fight as hard as you can. And he thought he would come out looking to the court like he was the nice, friendly guy by going, he even put in his pleadings, look, we didn't even object to these. Well, then you did your client a disservice because I objected to yours, and rightly so. So be aggressive when it's Jordan Peterson's. You should be a savage and then learn to control it. So you don't want a family law attorney that's just picking fight after fight after fight, because then that person's just taking your money. But you want someone when the fight is picked that will go to the mat and protect your interests.
Yeah. I love that. There's such a duality there. So I love how you phrase that. I wanted to kind of now ask, so now that was great. We're just talking about when you're looking at attorneys or you've gotten to that point. Have you seen anything in your opinion? We were talking about this the other day. When a spouse, or in this case, let's just say a woman, a wife says, I want a divorce, I want to separate. Have you seen anything in your experience work to kind of help stave off the divorce and give men more time to actually work things out? Because I think for a lot of guys, we're just dumb Neanderthals, and we have to be told over and over again, multiple times, that we're messing up before we realize, oh my God, this is actually pretty serious. My wife wants me to change. And I'm just wondering, have you seen anything work where guys have been able to turn things around and they didn't have to go to divorce?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or
So
would you even say, Joe, sorry, last part, would you say, is there anything you could say to your wife at the time and say, hey, that could actually stave off the divorce and give them time to save the marriage?
yeah. So again, it's again, I'm not trying to make money for divorce attorneys or for the family law profession in general. If you can avoid something that can tear apart your family, you always should try to do that. So, I think therapy is a big thing. I think going to having your own therapist is huge. I think if you're having those kind of problems and your family's falling apart, someone wants to leave you, or there's issues with kids in custody, you should be talking to someone for yourself and not just go. The first time you go to therapy shouldn't be the time that you go to family therapy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if someone's saying that there's issues and like this person who promised to be with you your entire life is now going, I no longer want to be even around you, then there's work that needs to be done. And it's almost never on one side. Usually both sides need to work. So a combination of having your own therapist and a combination of doing some family therapy, I think is a good idea.
I agree. I think you should at least make a huge attempt to say, hey, I went all in. And I'll be honest, I did 4 years of therapy and it did something for me, but it didn't get me to where I'm at now. I can share more about that later. I think therapy is okay. I think it's good for some people. I think and one of my friends who is a coach and a therapist, he said it best. He said a lot of therapy, they talk about the conscious mind, but to work on the subconscious mind is where radical change comes. But the point being, Joe, I think is people need to go all in and make an effort and say, hey, we tried this. And a lot of times therapy is the first time anybody's done any inner work. So for that, it's perfect.
Yeah, and it's not just like therapy isn't for some people. I think it can. I don't want to say do you harm, but like for a small percentage, it's not going to give you anything.
Yeah.
But maybe it just opens your eyes to something that like. So I had a therapist for a long time, and she was a very sweet older woman, kind, but she didn't really push me. And I wanted somebody who was like an old New York Jew who was going bullshit, Joe, and pointing the finger back at me. And that's who I got now. And he's a great guy. But I need that. We're cops. We do well. And men, no, you're wrong. And this is why. Not like, well, maybe have you considered, because then you're going to find a way around blaming someone else. So I
Yeah.
think therapy can just be a good jumping off point. But you can read self-help books, you can get great coaching, but a lot of it just comes to take some personal responsibility for it, and listen to the person that's telling you that you're not making them happy anymore. Well, have some, honestly, number one reason why people get divorced is communication breaks down.
Yep.
So have some genuine communication with them. Well, what is wrong? What am I doing? And it's not, well, you always complain. You never take out the word always and never. Give me specific examples. What am I doing? Where have you noticed a pattern? But I would put the caveat, if there's abuse and major neglect or threats or severe mistreatment, then maybe therapy and saving it isn't the case. I
Yeah.
don't want somebody to feel like they have to spend weeks or months or years trying to save something and they're being physically, emotionally, or mentally abused. So that is the caveat, that if there's some things that just need to end and they need to end right now.
Yeah.
But for the average relationship where there isn't, serial cheating and there isn't emotional, physical, mental abuse and neglect, then you have to take those steps and try and save it, because divorces can and almost always get messy. I mean,
Yeah.
I have seen some ugly divorces when they didn't have a single penny to rub together.
Yeah.
No kids, no house, no money, and just dragged it on for years for no reason to make the other person hurt.
Yep. Yeah. Same. And so I'm with you. I always tell guys, if you want to save your marriage and you think there's a shot, my advice is if you want to stave off divorce and save your marriage, tell your wife or significant other that you are hiring a coach or you're going to hire a therapist. And for the next 3 months, you're going all in. And if they still don't see any change and they don't see anything has been any different, and if they still want to go through with it, fine. But I think I like to at least show some action, radical personal responsibility, like you said, ownership,
Yep.
do something about it, be the leader in your home. And then number two is give a deadline, give a timeline, and have some time to review and reflect. And I think that's a good solution for most. I can't say it's always going to work, but it's probably the best you can do.
That's huge, because then if the person that doesn't want to be with you, if your significant other, you're giving them a deadline where they should see some change, but you have to do the work. And if you can do it by reading a book on your own, great. But like I do better, like when I ran cross country and I had a coach yelling at me to do something or teaching me or showing me the way, I'm way better when I'm given instruction. You're super fit and I know this and I'm trying to get in better shape, but it's hard for me to get motivated to go to the gym by myself. So it helps when you have that accountability buddy, is what they would say.
Yep.
Military and other places call it accountability buddy. So having a coach or having somebody you can go to, because just reading a book, maybe you got the wrong book. Maybe you got a book written for women and you're a man, or a book written for men and you're a woman. I think that accountability, you got to do the work too. It's like not doing your homework assignment. You're like, oh, honey, 3 months, you're going to see a change. I'll start taking out the garbage. I'll start doing this. And then you do it Monday, you don't do it Tuesday, Wednesday, you do it Thursday. You don't really give a shit enough about your relationship then. You've pretty much proven to your coach or yourself and your significant other that doing 20% of the work, during that 3 month or 2 month or 6 month time period, you don't care enough about the relationship. Just like, it's like, I'm going to get in shape. I gave myself a 12-week program, and then you go for 3 or 4 days. You don't really want to get in shape that bad. But even failing at a coaching system will tell you something about yourself.
Yep.
Try it, and it should. I think it'll be successful. I think it'll be helpful. But even if it doesn't, maybe it shows your significant other. Maybe you don't knock it out of the park, but your significant other says, "Crap! Like I've never seen this effort from you. I've been married to you for 10 years, and I've never seen you apply yourself. Even though you're not crushing it, you're doing something." Or it might just tell you, "Oh, I really don't care. Like, I really don't want to say this. This isn't working for me, because if I did, I'd be doing these little small steps that don't take a lot of effort, but I won't even make that effort." Well, then maybe that tells you something about, where you guys should be headed as far as saving versus actually going through the divorce.
Yeah, it's a feedback for sure. And my story, that's exactly it. I went all in and radically changed in 3 months. I want to ask you, is there anything, if guys are listening to this, is there anything if they are going through with the divorce, is there anything that they can do to mitigate some of the damage or expedite some things? Because like you said, they get messy and there's a lot of financial heartaches that happen. And we know someone right now, one of our friends, who's already spent 30 grand on his marriage. And it's like, is this thing, I mean, this divorce, is it going to end? And like, can we get this thing over with? Like, we're already 30 grand deep here, man. And lawyers going back and forth. It's just insane. And I don't think anybody wants to do that. I think the average divorce, according to Forbes 2024, is like seven. That's like the median. But you and I both know that probably average even 15 or higher. And I just got done talking to a TV producer, and he's at 1.8 million to finalize his divorce, which has taken 5 years. So 5 years. And I know that's not the average, but we're looking at like 1 to 2 years for a lot of folks, and if it, and that's we're looking at 30 to 100,000. Is there anything these guys can do to mitigate things, in your opinion, to save them some of the heartache and create the amicable divorce that you were successfully able to do?
Yeah, so there's things you can do both pre-marriage, during the marriage, and afterwards, and like some of them overlap. Asset protection is important. There's a couple different ways you can do it. There's prenups and postnups. Before marriage, and post after marriage, they're nuptial agreements. They basically have the same requirements, and I'll just really briefly go over it. Like the nuts and bolts are: they have to be in writing. It has to be signed by both parties. Yeah, there can't be any duress or coercion. You can't threaten somebody to sign it. It usually comes up where one party is a much higher earner, and before the marriage says, "Hey, I'd like you to sign this prenup." The mistake they usually make is they do it right before the wedding. And there's tons of case law about this, and I'm not going to start dropping like in remarriage and give you a bunch of case names, but over the years it developed. It's like the cop thing. Hey, we have a new rule, cops, and the cops go, "Okay, we found a way around it." And they're like, "Okay, there's another rule." So that's kind of where they are where we're at with this prenup and postnup.
You're walking down the aisle, I could just see, and hey, by the way, could you just sign this? Thanks. Yeah.
So where people use, so it's got to be signed, got to be notarized by both parties, signed by both parties, notarized. There can't be any duress or coercion. Neither party can hide your assets. You can't disclose. You have to need full disclosure, otherwise it's void. The part where people usually where these agreements get overturned, and I would say they get overturned half the time. So while this is a method to protect yourself, just realize unless you have a ton of money, you got a 50-50 shot of this being challenged at the point of divorce.
I love that you're saying this, because I had heard numerous times that pre and post nuptial agreements are like BS. They never work. And like, you can get one, but they don't always work. And I thought, what's the point then if they don't work? I thought that was the whole point. They're supposed to work. So this is what you're talking about.
So yeah, it's the reason why people say that is they usually think of the major, like it's always in the news, like Paul McCartney or whoever, and it's billions, hundreds of millions of dollars. So the two ways that they fail, the two most common ways are there's this, both in pre and post nuptial agreements, there's this clause that gives the family law, again, the family law courts can be like the Wild West. There's a whole bunch of clauses that give the judge a lot of power and leeway to do things fairly. So in both pre and post nuptial agreements, it can't be unconscionable. It can't be unfair. There's one quote that says, both parties have to deal with themselves in the highest level of good faith and fair dealing. Basically, if I have a judge look at it and go, "Hey, I know you both signed this, but I think it's unfair, so I'm going to invalidate it." Like that's one of the most common ways. The second most common way, if things are too lopsided, right? That's the most common way. The second way is people don't follow the proper protocol when it comes to having an attorney. So we'll go back, I'll just really quick history of it. Typically, it's a man who had more money, 1900s, early 19th century, or early 20th century, 1900s. There's a bunch of cases that came out, and the guy said, "I have millions and millions and millions of dollars. Here, sign this." And they gave the prenup to the woman. The woman basically, didn't have a job, didn't want to be destitute, and wanted to have the marriage. So there was an imbalance of power, and the woman signed it. And so it basically said, I get everything and you get nothing. Well, that happened for decades. And then the court started going, well, now we have all these women that are on welfare or relying on the state because they got nothing in the divorce. So the courts are going like, hey, I'm part of the legal system, but I'm also part of the government. We don't want the government paying for the kids and women because these guys walked away with everything. So we're going to place a rule. And one of the first rules was it has to be drafted by a lawyer. Okay, so then, well, the guy with the money had the lawyer. So a bunch more cases came down and they were still having the same result. Well, then they said, all right, you both have to have lawyers. All right. So then the rich guy goes, fine, I have my lawyer. Here is your lawyer. I'm paying for him. Well, now her lawyer owed a duty, or had a it was independent, but I'm paying your salary. Well, then they kept being unequal. They kept being the divisions kept being unequal.
Yeah.
Then it was, okay, you go get your own lawyer. I'm giving you the prenuptial agreement the day before the wedding, or 3 days before, or even if it was like a week before, I'll give you 24 hours to look it over, sign it. Well, then the courts were like, hey, that's not enough time, to go through this massive agreement and look at all your finances and make it a balanced choice. Now we add a quote unquote cooling off period, or what they say, it's a week. So I give it to you. You have to have your own legal counsel. I can't be paying for them or have any control over your separate legal counsel, and you have a full week to review it. So if you follow those steps, you're not going to get it overturned for the most part. So again, as long as it's not too imbalanced, and as long as the legal requirements are followed, most prenups and postnups, over 50%, say 60 odd percent, will be upheld. But remember, there's just that caveat that if a judge finds it's imbalanced or unfair, that they can overrule it and consider the entire agreement or part of it. They can almost redline it and change it.
Wow.
So that's what you can do to protect yourself pre and post. And just really quickly, do you know a lot about community property versus separate property?
No.
That's where a lot of the, so that's where a lot of the protection can happen, both if you're going for a divorce, you're in your marriage. And so the prenup, think before the marriage, during the marriage, and heading towards separation, what you need to worry about is your separate property and your community property. From the moment you get married, all the money you make from your work or from your investment income, et cetera, stocks you buy, if it's during the marriage, that's community property. That includes your pension, only for the years that you were married. So if you're a 20-year cop and you get married 10 years into your, 10 years into being a cop, you get married, they're entitled to that 10 years, half of that 10 years. So it's really important on your separate property, everything you owned prior to marriage, to keep it separate. You have to keep it separate. If you had a bank account, if you had a car, if you had a house or investment property, don't commingle it. Do not start taking your paycheck and putting it in the bank account where your separate property was. You can convert by screwing up and putting your community property, your joint funds with your significant other, into, let's say you had a 69 Camaro and it was your separate property. But then you start restoring it with all of, during your marriage, because people don't go, on day 1, year 2, year 3, I'm going to get divorced, I got to keep everything separate. So they start commingling it. Maybe they add a roof on the house of their separate property investment, but they use their current income, because where are you going to get the money from? So keep your separate property separate. Keep your car, your investment property separate, and don't use any of your community property, your income, to improve it or to make additions to it, because then it can be converted. Now there's a thing called tracing, where if you can prove to the penny and the dollar, I added a $30,000 roof onto my separate property, you can pay back when you're going through the divorce. You can reimburse the community, you and your wife, maybe do a cash out refi and say, look, I've paid you back all the community property that, or the joint funds that I use. And so that's a way to save that. But that gets a little more difficult. At this point, you kind of screwed up, and you've got to get a good lawyer that can go through, do all the work and say, okay, it looks like you spent 10 grand, on a paint job on your Firebird. So you owe the community 10,000. You put a roof on your investment apartment. So you owe back X. So as soon as you reimburse the community, now that you can basically say through tracing, I have now re-separated it. Some courts, if you do it for too long and there's too much entanglement and it's hard, it's easy with an account. I had 10 grand in an account before we got married. Now there's 30. I owe you 20. So
Gotcha.
that's an easy way to do it, but you really need to not commingle your separate and communal property. So you don't even have to bother trying to untangle it when the divorce is going, approaching.
Yeah, massive, dude. So much here. I mean, I know we could talk for hours. I wanted to just get this out to the community fast because it's one of the number one questions I get. And I also know that you have to run. This is great. And we'll probably have to do a couple more of these in the future. I think we're going to get a lot of good feedback. Just for everybody that's listening, and you're like, man, this is good. This is just the beginning. We want to learn more. Joe and I are looking actually at launching a coaching program to help men going through these situations where they need a little bit of extra support throughout the process. Because like you said, lawyers can be quite expensive and there's a lot of fees that come on every time you have to ask someone a question. And so if we can help mitigate that for you, either number one, first, just save the marriage. That's what my job is saving the marriage and saving it from the beginning so it doesn't even happen. But if you unfortunately do have to go through this process, there's a lot more that you go into the details in terms of strategic asset management, protecting your business interest, understanding some of these caveats and prenups and postnups, and then also helping men navigate what if they want to just mediate and do it on their own, but being I don't want to say aggressive, but being understanding the process, having someone like you walk them through the process so that they're able to confidently go through and divvy up do all this process without even having a lawyer. That's the biggest win. And like you said, if they do have to hire a lawyer, how to pick the right one. And also, I think there's even maybe some potential for you to even do some of the process for them if that's what they want, because you've got some great experience being the guy on the offense. So I want to wrap things up, but if anybody's interested in that, just drop us a line, comment below, and we'll get you guys the details. But anything else, Joe, you want to leave us with? Anything that I didn't ask you, wish you had to mention?
No, I think my overall process to this is don't throw your money at a lawyer or the wrong lawyer. The lawyers have a bad rap for a reason. There's a lot of great lawyers out there, both morally, ethically, and then just skill-wise. But in the family law arena, people are hurt. You're going through a divorce. People are upset. Maybe there was cheating. Maybe there's multiple things of cheating. Maybe there's neglect. Maybe in our world, you're working midnights for 10 years and you don't get to see each other. There's disconnect. And what started out as something that was, positive and beneficial for both parties, is now can be vicious and mean and it's your family that's getting torn apart, your kids that are being affected. So, there's the divorce process is not very difficult, and lawyers like to make things a lot more complicated than they are so they can generate money and they can generate business for themselves. And I think we can dispel a lot of that. A lot of it can be simply explained. And you have a lot of aha moments when you talk to somebody like myself or you, and they will just break it down for me. Oh, so I only need to file this and then go there? Yep, that's all you need to do. Well, that seems so much more difficult. Yeah, when you're reading the family law code and your code of civil procedure, and a lot of family law is checking a box, doing something by a certain date, and that's pretty much it. And so if you can save yourself tens of thousands of dollars by doing it yourself, or hiring a joint mediator to draft your agreement for you, or using a template that I've created or someone else has created, keep that money, put it in your pockets. Don't spend $20,000, $30,000 on a lawyer or on a divorce if you can afford it, or if you can avoid it. Sorry. Put that money in your pockets, in your kids' pockets. Use that to better yourself and your family rather than just throwing it at some continuous ongoing feud with your significant other. And both of you should come to that realization, because it's not just one-sided. Like, we can save you money and we can tell you, what to do and how to do it, how the process actually works. But if you can explain it to your significant other, you both should be on the same page. Hey, do you want to waste $20,000 on an attorney and fight for 2 years? No, neither do I. So let's try these other avenues. Let's try and fix the marriage. Let's maybe go to counseling. Let's maybe go to a mediator. Let's maybe do it ourselves. So,
And that was the point, Joe. I think you could help actually people do it on their own and do it for themselves and represent themselves. Like they don't even need a lawyer. They can just do it with some of your support, guidance, and advice. And the big thing I would just leave people with too is, and I see it right now with one of our friends who's going through it, and I see this all the time with guys. And it's funny because this is life. This is just a metaphor for life. When you do anything without clarity and you don't know the North Star, you don't know where you're actually going, it's overwhelming. It's unclear. There's a lot of fear and anxiety. And I see most guys, and that's why they do pay these exorbitant fees for lawyers, because they don't know. And they're just like, all right, now what? What's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? But with someone like you and I, it's like, hey, here's the next steps. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. And then that gives you so much more confidence. And you're like, okay, I feel safe again now because I know what I'm doing and it empowers me. I think that's the big thing. And that's how we're going to disrupt the paradigm of divorce and the uncertainty about it.
yeah. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And honestly, I'd rather know I'm walking into a shitstorm. I'd rather know I'm walking into something negative or something difficult than to kind of walk through it and then just keep getting hit over and over again. And it's sad to say, but any attorney, family law attorneys, corporate civil, they're not going to want to lay out the whole process and tell you how easy it is and say, oh, I'm only going to work 5 hours on your case. Keeping you in the dark, and it sounds, I'm not trying to paint the whole legal profession as negative, but keeping you in the dark makes them money. If you didn't need them, they wouldn't, like the whole profession, there's a reason why like the profession is made to be difficult and inaccessible, so that you have to pay, $400, $500, $900 an hour for a lawyer. And so not all the time, but often lawyers will find reasons to continue the work or stoke the fire because it generates more income from them. So anything I can do to dispel a lot of the, you'll get guys, we talked about this and not to go back on it, but like, hey, it's cheaper to keep her, or hey, I'm going to be paying $3,000 a month in child support. I'm like, you make $5,000. How would you make $5,000 a month, or, before taxes? How would you be paying? Well, I just heard from Bob or so-and-so got screwed over in his divorce. Yeah, Bob probably didn't tell you that he had a lot more cash, or he didn't tell you that he was hiding something, or he didn't tell you that, you can sit down. There's something called a Dissomaster. You can run the numbers. There's a free one online. It's not very accurate, but you can run the numbers and find out where you're going to be on child support, on alimony. If you talk to somebody that has access to, like myself, that has access to the actual court docs, the court Dissomaster, you can run a two-way bonus table of if, you can run spreadsheets on what you would actually pay based on your current income. So it's time to dispel all the hey, I don't know what's going to happen. No, you can, prior to the divorce, prior to the separation, or even if you're in the middle of it, find out almost to the penny what you're going to be paying, or what you would pay, or what's going to happen. And you can know it all up front, so you're not sitting there. I mean, in California, it's 60 days, it's 180 days. You get divorced in 6 months. That is the minimum. You cannot get divorced before that. So, but these divorces last a year, 2 years, and knowing that's happening, the lawyers are making cash. And so you can know exactly how the case is going to go from the outset. We can outline the entire thing, tell you where the pitfalls will be, and to say it in a very accessible way where it's not some lawyer trying to talk over your head to seem smarter than you.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. Joe Clark, thanks for being on the show, brother. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Joe. It's really good to see you, man. I miss you.
Likewise.